consuming more data than ever before. What is the state of broadband technology?
So basically what's happening today is that we have what we call a convergence of technologies around the world.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, once upon a time, you picked up the telephone and you got voice over the phone, and we were happy with that.
Yeah.
And
the
a lot
old
of people,
days.
the good old days, yeah. And some of us still like to live in that time. In actual fact, up until 2 years ago, 60% of connections in New Zealand were actually just voice, what we call baseband services.
Yeah.
Now, 2 years later, all of a sudden, we've had this massive uptake in broadband systems around the country. A lot of that's due to a lot of the marketing campaigns that have been run on fibre and broadband. And it's become an extraordinary part of our lives. Without it, we can't survive. Without it, I don't know if you've noticed or not, but if you don't have your mobile device, if you don't have your iPad, or if you've left it somewhere, it's the end of the world.
Yeah.
We can't function.
Yeah.
So it's become a really integral part of our daily lives. So we expect it to work, and we expect it to work well.
And we want it to be quick.
And we want it to be quick.
Yeah.
We don't really want to know the science of how it gets down that pipe and gets to us. We just want it to work.
Yeah.
And that's where people like myself come in to the equation, because we work quietly in the background to make that happen.
Now, you're something of an innovator, though, and so you've been working on fibre.
That's right. So one of the things that we noticed 3 years ago was that we're coming to a point now with this convergence of technologies where we have people wanting to use multiple devices in their premises. They want to use their smart TVs, they want to use all their mobile devices, their iPads, their phones, streaming multiple devices that are using a lot of bandwidth.
Yeah.
What we find is that what people tend to talk about today is throttling of that bandwidth. In other words, they get shuffling when they're trying to watch Game of Thrones. It's getting right to the critical part where, someone's about to get, something happen to them.
And it kind of spools,
and
doesn't
it kind of
It's
spools,
like,
and it's like, oh my God, it's that anticlimax. And you might do that 3 or 4 times, just to get through your Game of Thrones. And that can be really frustrating.
And that's a bandwidth problem.
That's a bandwidth problem.
Because you're using too much stuff all at once, as we all want to do.
Correct.
Yeah. So how do you solve the bandwidth problem?
Well, the best way to solve that problem is to actually create a good connection in your internal premise cabling at home or in your business.
Right.
And one of the big things we talk about in broadband today is we talk about the speed. The speed is a big thing, and it's important, and that's true. But what's behind the speed are 2 things. You have a big water pipe and a little water pipe, and then you can have a water tank behind those pipes, right? The water tank is how much content in Game of Thrones we're wanting to download, because we want to get it at 1080, we might want to get it 4K, high resolution, and we want to get it on demand. So that's your content. Then you have your water pipe. Now the water pipe, depending on the size of that, is your bandwidth. If you have a big water tank and a small water pipe, what's going to happen is it's going to take a long time for that content to work its way through that pipe.
Yeah.
And that's where your shuffling comes in.
Okay.
If you have a big water pipe connected to that water tank, it's going to stream through there a lot more quickly.
Okay, this is brilliant, because I don't think I've ever really understood this before, so thanks. But so in terms of the thickness of the pipe then,
Yes.
what are your options? How does that relate to fibre or broadband or whatever kind of connections you can have?
Well, one of the things that we've been hearing a lot about and a lot of the campaigns is how we can get fibre to the home or fibre to the door.
Yeah.
And that's brilliant. And fibre...
So fibre is fibre optic cabling?
That's correct. So we're talking about fibre optic cabling, and we're talking about the technology whereby instead of using that plain old telephone system technology we were talking about before, we're now putting laser. All of that information is streamed through in the form of what we call a laser beam. And basically what that does is it means you can push a whole lot more information through that pipe.
Right.
So enter the fibre to the premise. So what tends to happen in today's technology is that's what we get. We get fibre to the door. We'll get fibre to a little box outside the home, but everything from that box to your ISP modem, that's your internet service provider.
Yeah.
Everything from that point will still be copper. 80% of homes in New Zealand and in Australia that are existing homes are substandardly cabled.
So what you're saying is you can get a nice fat pipe to the house, which is basically using fibre optic, how great and exciting,
Yes.
but still have really skinny little pipes inside the house which constrain your content.
Absolutely correct.
So what's the solution to that?
So the solution to that is to upspec your cabling at home.
Yeah. Now you actually are something of an innovator and you have a plug and play solution.
That's correct.
Yeah, tell me a bit about that.
So what I have is a solution that just uses little tiny components called media converters, and it's a little plug and play system. So you just have cabling and these components that plugs together and improves your broadband instantly.
And so what would you want it be for future proofing? For an individual or a business, what would you advise them?
I would advise them to go for a fibre optic cable system, an easy to install cabling system that's not too expensive. What we've done is we've taken the technology, which today would be extremely expensive,
Yeah.
and we've brought it right down to a level that everyone can afford it.
Yeah.
So that's our vision, make the world fibre, make the world aware that they can use optical fibre at home and at work to the desk.
Yeah. So really you're making fibre optic affordable for everyone.
That's correct, that's the vision.
Brilliant. Well, keep doing it. Good work.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us.